Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome.
In that image behind us, you're seeing someone joining us there. And the first comment, Mark said, wait, is that my replacement?
That's right. He's going to replace me at some point, I think.
But yeah, we thought we would, again, using artificial intelligence. And this time I told it, throw a robot in there. And let's see what that looks like. Kind of looks like C-3PO, doesn't it?
It does. That's exactly what I thought, too. Hopefully he's as polite as the C-3PO is.
Yeah. Of course, Hollywood would have you believe that these are evil and menacing and going to replace humanity. But this one looks pretty friendly as well.
I think so.
So one of the first things I want to do was if you guys can throw up an image, it's called, it's a numerical image, but it's the first one in the folder, and it's the U.S. electric vehicle sales in the first half of 2023. And I looked at this bar chart, and I was just floored for a bit because you can see what all the other EV manufacturers are creating and producing. And then, of course, we have the giant in the room, which is Tesla. And, folks, this is U.S. electric vehicle sales the first half of this year in 2023. And look at that insurmountable lead.
That's just amazing that Tesla has so much of a lead on the rest of the United States. Looking up this week as well, I noticed that the U.S. is lagging behind the rest of the world in EV adoption overall. We're at about 8% of auto sales or electric vehicles, and Europe leads in the 25 to 30% range, and even China is up around 21% in China and Southeast Asia.
Interesting. I wonder what Norway is. That's one of I think the world's leading adoption countries, right?
It is, and it's been, I know the numbers from a couple years ago are that they were up nearing 80%. They were at 79% adoption.
Amazing.
And looks like it's going to continue going up.
That is amazing, truly amazing. But yeah, if you look at some of these incumbents there, I mean, how does Ford feel when they look at a graph like this?
I know. They're the little tiny orange bar down on the right. And General... The thing I think that surprised me most on all of this is that General Motors has a wider bar, that fluorescent yellow bar, than Ford with orange. And Ford is the one that's trying so hard to become number 2 behind Tesla.
Yeah. Interesting graph, though. So the other thing that we can lead with, since we don't have any questions yet, apparently Elon tweeted something. I don't think you can call it that anymore, though, can you? It's now called posting. The button now says post instead of tweet, right?
Yeah, it's X, and I don't know.
You can't exit, so yeah, I guess post is a good way to do it.
Sure.
But anyway, what he posted was about the fight. He says, the fight will be managed by my and Zuck's foundations, not UFC. So they got them out of the picture. He says live stream will be on this platform, X and Meta, and everything in camera frame will be in ancient Rome, so nothing modern at all. So it doesn't sound like it's going to be one of those chain link fence octagons.
No, it doesn't sound like it. I had heard that Elon was talking to the Italian government about possibly doing something even in the Roman Colosseum. I don't know if that's the place that they were able to choose, or if it's somewhere else.
Sure, and they have more than one Coliseum. We had a visitor Sunday morning during the AI podcast from Verona, Italy, and they have a Coliseum there as well. And they have the gladiator reenactors out there pleasing the tourists and letting them take pictures in full garb with wooden swords, though.
Of course.
But so they have more than one Coliseum. That'd be interesting. So what I ended up doing was, and I wanted to read this to you, I asked artificial intelligence to reimagine a description of a hypothetical fight between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, presented with an intense and gritty style. And here goes. Neither mogul would yield an inch, so the crowd erupted, thirsting for more as the two technology titans clashed within the steel confines of the octagonal ring. More jabs, hooks, uppercuts, and takedowns. They fulfilled the crowd's wishes. When exhaustion set in, they would seize each other and tumble to the mat, wrestling and contorting like mechanical geniuses locked in a struggle of innovation and dominance. Their bodies against the cage's unforgiving mesh, they would rise, gasping for air, eyes narrowed, each studying each other's stance, their faces a canvas of sweat, determination, and claret. Both were bleeders. And it goes on. In the heat of the battle, they were no longer the entrepreneurs who had shaped the future. They were fighters, driven by something primal and fierce, and the crowd was witness to a spectacle unlike any other. The world watched, mesmerized by the clash of the giants, each refusing to submit, each embodying the relentless spirit that had brought them to the pinnacle of success. The fight raged on, a dance of power and will, a battle for supremacy in the octagon. This is going to be quite a spectacle.
What a narrative. Yeah, it's going to be something else. You know, I certainly hope it's not what some of these fights have devolved to, even UFC. Somebody comes in, they do a leg sweep, the first guy falls down, 10 seconds later he's tapped out and the fight's over.
Yeah.
That would be terrible. That'd be just, do something like that and just say, okay guys, let's do best 2 out of 3 or something like that.
Yeah. Or you have these gruesome episodes like, Conor McGregor when he twisted his ankle and you could hear the snap and he hit the canvas and his leg was contorted and twisted.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, these are trained fighters. These are guys that spend, hours at the gym every single day, watch their diets, train and train and train. Here we've got a couple of techno geeks. How are they going to avoid getting hurt if this thing really comes to blows, I
mean, that's the real question. It's, you see the, whether people call it real or fake wrestling, and then some Joe Schmuck gets into the ring, and the next thing you know, that guy's seriously hurt because he doesn't do the training like they do.
And those chairs that they hit each other with, those are steel chairs. Those aren't rubber, that's the real thing.
They're for real steel chairs, and they know how to take a hit, and your average Joe just doesn't know how to do that.
Yeah. But in the meantime, can you imagine the publicity, global publicity that this is generating?
Yeah, and I will continue to contend that's the whole reason for this. Mm-hmm. These guys are getting buku free advertising for their respective companies, for X, for Threads, for Tesla, for Facebook, all of that. They're getting all kinds of free advertising, and here I go. I just gave them more.
Yeah. And then you wonder, do they need it? I mean, whenever Elon tweets even a one-sentence phrase, millions of people, sometimes 100 million or more, watch that, chime in on it, and read that. But anyway, it's, they have the power, so they're exercising it, and it'll be interesting to see how this evolves. Got a couple of questions coming in from Instagram. Well, 2020, 1991. He said, what is future of electrical engineer with EV? Well, being in the EV service business, an electrical engineer has a place in the electric vehicle world, in the service world. Mm-hmm. Working for the OEMs that's an obvious choice because they're developing the product. But on the service side of things, that skill is vital. It's no longer strictly mechanical skills. How well do you weld? How well do you wrench? How well do you work on low-tech auto-type items? There's so much electronics in these cars, from the battery to the drivetrains, that a double E degree is definitely of great value. And you throw in some software, and suddenly you've got the right combination.
Yeah, I absolutely think that there's a good future for an electrical engineer in the electric vehicle space. All of the things that we've seen and had our electrical engineers do for years with critical power translate directly into the EV space. So, when you're dealing with MOSFETs and IGBTs and capacitors and resistors and all those things that the electrical engineers, that's where they make their home. EVs have all that stuff.
You know, it's even more interesting. We migrated, of course, from the critical power repair world into repairing EVs. Not only is the technology identical, you have a DC plant or a DC storage system. You have a three-phase inverter because a three-phase motor is what drives the car and gives you regenerative braking and all that. But then in the logic on the circuit boards, you also have firmware and you have CAN bus signals. And in the critical power world, they actually use CAN signals as well and firmware. So the technology, like you said, our double E's that work on critical power can easily walk into Gruber Motor Company, and they're able to work on those cars without skipping a beat.
Yeah, it's been pretty impressive. We didn't realize that when we were first getting into the car repair business that was something we could do. And so I remember you making the claim, rightfully so. Hey, I know Tesla's only been around since 2008, and it's 2015 right now, but I can still say we've got 30 years of experience in this area.
Yeah, in fact, the final realization was, we've been in the Tesla repair business all along.
Yeah.
Just didn't realize it.
We sure have. Instagram, Kevin Coraith says, guys, I love the fact that one can have an aftermarket for EVs. Definitely do. And, it's independent shops like us and a few others here in the U.S. that are going to really help that. Places like the Conrad Buck over in Europe, they also do the same type of thing. That is going to be the future of auto shops as well.
Oh, yeah. In fact, in our videos, oftentimes these guys do the shorts for us. When we're over at Gruber Motor Company, I will introduce it and say, welcome back to Gruber Motor Company, the auto shop of the future. And that's exactly what that is.
That's exactly what it is and what it's going to be. The tidal wave, in my estimation, is about 2 years away. And that's when the first of the Model 3s start coming off of warranty.
We'll have a flood of cars.
That's when we'll really get inundated with everything. Yep.
So we've got a TikTok comment from Three Bunnies. He says, I work hydrogen and we are taking over.
Three Bunnies, I'd love to hear a comment from you about white hydrogen. Tell me what you know about it. Tell me what you think about it. Is that the future of hydrogen, or is one of these other types of colors of hydrogen where you're using energy to make hydrogen so that it can be converted back into energy going to be the thing?
TikTok False Hopes counteracts that claim and says, oh no, not the hydrogen guy. And he's got a laughing emoji. There are a number of key people in this industry that weigh in on this hydrogen thing. And it seems like only Toyota is taking that seriously at this point.
Well, actually, not just Toyota. Nikola with their semis. Nikola has done that. They've got the same battery structure or they have the same electric motor structure. I take that back, under the semi tractor, but it can be powered either as a battery electric vehicle or as a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle. Now, unfortunately, and it made the news, even one of our listeners, Ray had come to us and said, hey, guys, what do you think about Nikola and their recall? So here's kind of the story behind that, because with Nikola being here in Phoenix, we saw some of this happen live. 4 Nikola trucks caught fire overnight in a parking lot about 6 weeks ago. Nikola suspected arson at the time. Now, through the investigation, they've determined that it probably was not arson.
And if you remember, the reason they suspected arson had happened to coincide with the layoff of a number of employees the previous day.
Yes. And on top of that, they thought that they had seen somebody leaving the lot just a few minutes before one of the trucks caught fire, and it spread to 3 other trucks. Incidentally, 4 weeks later, one of those trucks once again caught fire.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, it happened again, and it was one of the burned trucks that caught fire. Since the truck had already been off to the side, they were able to extinguish that without further damage. But Nikola found that there was a coolant issue with the battery in these trucks, that the batteries were not being properly cooled, and so the batteries were working their way up towards and going into thermal runaway.
Interesting.
And so that's Nikola has been forced to recall all of their trucks to effect a fix for this pretty dangerous thing that's going on with their trucks right now.
And of course, thermal management this time of year in Phoenix during this unprecedented record-breaking heat wave is probably a huge issue.
I think it definitely is. And if you recall, this happened right at the beginning of this really intense heat wave that we had here in Phoenix in the summer.
I do remember, yes. Guys, I got a picture I'm going to throw up. It's the data center, Tesla data center. And there was an announcement this week that Tesla is building a first-of-its-kind data center without elaborating what first-of-its-kind would mean. But they have been buying up some of the existing data centers. And let me explain for a moment. We've been in the data center business for 40 years now.
Yeah.
And we design and build computer rooms, or data centers as they call them now. And the whole data center migration has been that initially companies would develop or set aside some space in their facilities for a computer room. And then we would come in, we would put in raised floor, we would put in power conditioning or UPS, we would put in halon for fire suppression, and we would take a look at the BTU content in that room and provide dedicated air conditioning called a computer room AC unit or a crack unit. And of course, data cabling to connect everything together. There was a wiring closet where everything came in and truncated. Mm-hmm. As the computing needs began to grow and continue to grow, eventually some companies went to co-locations. These were professional designated data centers that were able to accommodate a large number of customers. And they provided security, they provided redundancy in terms of power, clean power, and also management of certain processing functions. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that was considered to be more advantageous for a company to outsource their data processing needs to a co-location. And of course, as computing needs continued to increase, eventually co-locations became very large, and they even began to look at locating in areas where you had natural cooling because of the amount of heat that these were generating.
Sure, you can think of Google in the Northwest, where they have a large DC power plant that is water-based, so they get their power from the river that they're around, as well as a lot of their cooling from that same river.
Mm-hmm. So it looks like Tesla, for a while, and also Twitter, had been outsourcing some of their data center needs, and a lot of big companies in the world are consumers of this type of need. Companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and of course Meta, Facebook. And it turns out that now Tesla is getting into the data center business for their own needs. Mm-hmm. At least initially, they're not talking about selling co-location services. But one of the reasons that people are beginning to suspect is driving this is, let me go down a bit further here. It turns out Tesla is seeing the need for data processing increasing rapidly as it tries to take advantage of this growing fleet of millions of vehicles that are all equipped with cameras and also eventually neural nets that are powering the self-driving effort. Mm-hmm. So their computing needs are growing enormously. They are also talking about a growing number of connectivity features that they're trying to sell to the vehicle owners with a subscription basis. And right now it's $10 a month for what they call premium connectivity on a subscription basis. So it looks like their computing needs are going to not only continue to increase, but also grow in the future quite a bit. Twitter apparently also was using co-locations. And when Elon first took over, he discontinued some of these data centers and then moved that to some other companies. At one point, he was even talking about that a Sacramento data center wasn't really cutting it because, as he said, that Sacramento is possibly the worst place to have a data center for Twitter Spaces, and he complained about the heat. Well, most recently, apparently, he is going back into that data center, and that Twitter has actually taken over one of the leased data centers that they used to use as well in Sacramento.
I look back and I of course have my background is technology more than it is finance or anything else that I'm in. And if you look back in history, you start out with these great big rooms with these great big computers that are specially cooled, and you have all these banks of tape drives and stuff like that. And they move from there to smaller and smaller, and eventually you get to the desktop computer. You no more than get to the desktop computer in 1981, and a few years later, you've got desktop computers talking to each other. And then from there, you go to a server, a file server where all the individual desktop computers can now talk to the file server and share their files. And it's only a short distance before you're going right back to where you started. Banks of computers sitting on racks in a specially cooled room with instead of tape drives, they're hard drives now, but it's the same thing. It's some sort of an outside location, but the computing needs are there. With Tesla and the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of cars that they're putting on the road every single year, if I'm an IT guy, I'm looking at this and saying, wow, I've just added 300,000 computers onto my network this year, and it's only halfway over in the United States.
Right. The whole concept of co-location isn't new. In fact, I remember when I started in computers in the mid-'70s, there were companies that were buying various types of computers, mostly IBM and Digital at the time, PrimeNet, Burroughs, maybe Wang thrown in. And the concept of time sharing was a popular one because most businesses didn't have the financial wherewithal to buy an IBM 360 and then the staff to support it.
Right.
So it was cheaper for them to subscribe to a time-sharing service where they had a computer somewhere else and through modems would actually communicate and do their batch processing. So that whole concept isn't new. I remember in Phoenix here, we had customers that would buy a home, a depressed home in a depressed neighborhood in Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, and convert that into a time-sharing location. The reason I knew that, it was we used to go out and repair them.
Yeah.
And you would see on shelves banks of 300 baud and eventually 1,200 baud modems that were all linked to various customers around Phoenix. And that's how they were able to do their timeshare or their processing, their batch processing.
Oh, that's crazy. I'll bet the phone companies just had a fit with those customers.
Yeah, they were tying up the lines. They were dedicated lines eventually.
Yeah, but even with dedicated lines, you've got one pedestal sitting out in the street that's supposed to, take care of 24 homes. So at most they have 48 cables for, 24 pair for 24 homes, and you have one home taking all 24 pair.
Yep. Instagram, Zahi_D_VTR. He says Petroleum to EV conversion kit. That's a great question or a great comment. What we're waiting for in this EV industry is the equivalent of crate engines that were very popular in the last century when you got an old muscle car, for example, and you knew that engine was shot, the rings, the bearings were shot, and rather than try to rebuild that old engine, you could buy a crate engine from the manufacturers often. And, that would be a plug-and-play thing that would go in your car and give it new life. The same is going to be true eventually as people develop plug-and-play EV conversions for some of these legacy cars. And it's going to be popular because what we feel is not only will the governments around the world begin to prevent manufacturers from cranking out any more ICE engine cars. 2035 is a popular year that's been targeted here in the U.S. for that. But what we think will happen later on, at some point later, as the planet continues to decline and the need for getting fossil fuel burners off the road, the governments will eventually ban them on the road, except for private racetracks, perhaps. And at that point in time, if you want to keep your '64 Ford Mustang alive, you're going to have to do an EV conversion in order to continue to drive that car.
I can see that coming in the future, most definitely.
Instagram, Garav_Agarwal.L. He says, hi, I am Indian. So we're assuming East Indian based on the name. Welcome.
Welcome. And, we've seen a lot of questions come in this morning from Instagram and TikTok. I'd love to see some of the YouTube questions start coming in as well.
Well, I got to read this one. Instagram, Perp Pharaoh says, mid-70s, sheesh, I wasn't even born then.
Yeah, I know. We're old.
Yeah.
YouTube, to be announced. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome back. Glad to have you here today. He's come to us, I believe, from Europe, but let us know where you're coming from as well.
YouTube EV fan says, EV conversions will be massive, but will you need to be an engineer to install them? You know, I've seen some of the early versions of these conversion packages, and they're actually simplifying them further. In a Tesla Roadster, for example, you have a large power electronics module, weighs over 100 pounds, full of circuit boards, fans, and everything, right? That's what converts the DC to three-phase AC. And then you have a drive motor down below, a three-phase AC induction motor. These new plug-and-play versions that are beginning to emerge actually combine the inverter with the motor, very much like the Tesla Model S, where you have actually three components. You have an inverter, round, you have a transaxle, and then you have your three-phase AC induction motor. In fact, guys, if you can pop up a picture, I've got a real good rendition of that. It's called the BMW M5 Motor. And here you can see the, no, I guess that isn't there. All right. You know what? I don't have that picture. What's showing just below that picture that we just threw up is a meme that shows the size difference between a Tesla Model S motor and a BMW M5 motor. While we're on the subject, look at the plumbing. This is a twin-turbo V8, by the way. And this is what we're beginning to get away from.
Wait, that's real?
It's real.
This is real. Jesse, I had the exact same reaction. Like, okay, come on, really? All of this? So I decided I'm going to do a Google image search, and I'm going to find out what's really the story on this. The earliest mention I have of this photo comes from a small automotive shop in Kennedy, Texas, named Brown's Automotive. They posted a picture of this actual motor, and it looks like it's their post. If you look at the very right edge, that is right there is the spring and the CV boot for the axle coming off of that motor for front wheels. And I love their caption on this as well. It said, if a tech murdered an engineer, this would be Exhibit A on the way to dismissal.
That is very true. I'm going to give you that image now, Jesse. I just did a screenshot, and we should be able to pop that up to show the size differences between this V8 BMW creation and there you go. So the portion on the right is the inverter. In between, you have a transaxle, one speed, no clutches, no bands. And to the left, you have the three-phase AC induction motor. And you can see how much simpler and lighter and smaller these new electric vehicles are. And the amount of, or the lack of maintenance is directly attributed to the much fewer components in an electric vehicle.
And I'll bet you money that electric motor on the Model S puts out more horsepower than that twin turbo V8 on the top.
It does. I'm glad you mentioned it's almost twice as much horsepower.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Hey, Pete.
Yes.
You know, I still have my 6.0, my white truck, because I bought that 6.7 diesel. So I got down a rabbit hole on the 6.0 because I was thinking, man, if I got rid of that diesel and went to an electric, what would I need to do? And I'd have a lot of torque. It'd be an electric truck. It'd be pretty awesome. It seems like a lot of your skill set's going to be fabrication, a lot of welding, a lot of modifying, cutting metal, making it to fit to the chassis. So I would think that it wouldn't be so much of the electrical engineering side, but the fabrication side is what you would need as a skill set to convert these. Is that correct?
Very true. And that's why these plug-and-play type companies that are going to emerge, because it's going to be a viable business, They will anticipate all of these modifications and fabrication that need to be made. They'll make the custom brackets to mount, for example. The battery is another issue. They're going to have to make some sort of mounting method for a lot of battery storage. But initially, there will be experimenters. There always are. And these are the people that have welding skills and they have engineering talent, and they're going to create customs. But for the general population to get involved, we're going to need to see something that's plug and play and easier to do. For example, the instrumentation inside an EV, if you're doing a conversion, it would be nice if that was able to fit into the existing vehicle's instrumentation panel. Because now you don't have something kludge, you don't have a clone type situation, but it mirrors what the original instrumentation was. And that's where I think that these aftermarket people are going to become involved. Now, in the last century, the OEMs like GM were actually making these type of crate motors and these conversion packages. So it's not going to be just private industry, I believe, that's going to focus on creating product for this aftermarket effort. But we may start seeing it from the OEMs as well, the incumbent OEMs. And that's, of course, provided they survive, because this should not be their first order of business. The first order of business is let's get their EV program pivoted and converted so they can continue to sell cars and survive.
Yeah, and there's there will be questions for every car maker out there that's not named Tesla. There's going to be questions about survival in the midterm future, that 5 to 10 year time frame, as to whether they can adjust to the change that's coming.
Yeah. TikTok, Max_TTalk21. Congrats, guys. Hope to see you soon in Italy. If you're thinking we're going to the Zuckerberg-Musk cage fight, I don't think so.
That would be a lot of fun to do, but I'm just not sure if we'd be able to swing that particular one.
Yeah.
On Instagram, Perp Pharaoh says, we need to have a twin-turbo diesel/EV motor in the wheels.
I didn't bring it to this podcast, but there is Thursday's podcast. There was a remarkable car that I posted in our the repository of talking points that actually uses in-wheel motors on all four wheels, and claiming to have finally perfected the issues surrounding in-wheel motors. So we'll bring that Thursday for those of you interested. I don't have a lot of details because I spent only like 5 minutes just before the podcast while it came in.
Yeah, I happened to see that video. That's one of the last things I was looking at before coming in here, and it's going to be worth talking about. It's a Chinese-made company or Chinese-owned company, but they are the ones that ended up with all the assets from Saab, who went out of business in 2012. And among the assets that Saab had were some designs for an in-motor electric vehicle, an in-wheel motor electric vehicle. And these guys, the engineers, without a whole lot to do, they said, have continued on, and they have this pretty remarkable car that on first drive looks pretty incredible, actually.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll report Thursday then, so stay tuned. YouTube, to be announced, says thank you. You're welcome. YouTube also, to be announced, says that's a real engine. I removed one once. It's a real engine. You're right.
Yes, it is. On TikTok, iPhone House says hello from Mexico Engineering Shop. Gives us a burrito and a taco emoji.
Oh, you just made me hungry. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Facebook, Badhon Saha, he says, from Bangladesh, well, welcome. You're in the other side of the world, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. On Instagram, Perp Pharaoh follows up with his earlier comment, saying, why convert when you can combine?
Oh, we're talking hybrid now?
And then going like that. He's talking about hybrid.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm thinking you get potentially the disadvantages of complexity without all of the advantages of straight EV.
Yeah. I have another, no, I don't have a picture on this one, but here's a news item that had me kind of surprised. And what they're showing here is a picture of a Ferrari. It says that China has become the first country where supercar maker Ferrari sells more than a quarter of its new and pre-owned vehicles to women. And it goes on. Female buyers on the average accounted for 26% actually of the company's sales on the Chinese mainland over the last 5 years, far exceeding the figure in any other country. Now, I've been a member of exotic car clubs here in Arizona for over 30 years now. And,
Sure.
I tend to think it was male dominated. Now that I'm really struggling to think this through, I don't remember one female member in any of those groups. And we're talking about Lamborghini, McLaren, Ferrari, Bugatti, any of those supercars, Pantera even.
Sure.
These were all guys. And if the ladies were involved, they were girlfriends, wives. And but this is remarkable. So you have to ask yourself, why does in China these types of cars appeal to the female members to that extent?
That's a great question. And the first thought I had when I saw this as well was it's even more remarkable here than what we have here in the United States, because China, for 2 generations, had a one-child per family policy. As a result, the Chinese population is about 58 to 60% male and only about 40% female. So now, if you've got 26% of all car sales going to the females, that's even more remarkable, because it's not a 50-50 split like it is in the rest of the world.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind, and of course I may get in trouble here, I'm not trying to be sexist, but maybe there was some sort of a tax advantage where the rates or the insurance rates might have been lower for the female population. Or maybe Chinese women are more aggressive in their driving habits and enjoy these cars. Any of you that want to chime in, by the way, we'd love to hear your opinions on this particular issue.
It's a fascinating article, very, very much so. TikTok, Bill Wood asks us, when will Tesla have a 600-mile battery in their Model Y?
I don't know that. I know that I can't imagine that Tesla is not continuously doing R&D and working on battery tech. In fact, they have factories that are dedicated to that. So I guess my comment to that is, if somebody else can do it, Tesla's certainly able to do it. And why they haven't yet is the question.
Well, maybe they haven't yet because they realize that the future is not necessarily bigger and bigger batteries.
Good point.
And the future may be something like additional charging capabilities. We've talked about inductive charging. We've talked about solar charging. We've talked about a number of things that can go on that would make the need for a 600-mile battery irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
How far does a person need to go between charges is kind of the question at hand. There are not a lot of people, even here in the United States, that will drive 600 miles even in a full day.
Yeah, it's only on trips and vacations. And, how many people commute and eat up 200 miles range? If you probably need to get another job, because that's a pretty long haul.
Probably that's a long commute.
Yeah. YouTube to be announced says, hey guys, why is the Model S refresh non-plaid 2-motor so much slower acceleration than the older non-refresh S? I know the refresh is faster top end, but acceleration is noticeably different. 1-to-1 ratio, he asks. I don't know the answer to that.
I think that's one we're going to have to take and get back to when we here on Thursday. I don't know the answer to that one either.
Mm-hmm. And then Instagram, it looks like Ian Caldwell has joined us again. He's from the UK, I believe. Hey guys, he says, good to join again. What do you make of the solid-state battery technology from Toyota? I know we covered that in an earlier podcast.
We did. That solid-state battery technology is pretty exciting. The one disappointing thing that I felt of the press announcement that Toyota put out is that they're announcing something today that they're not going to be delivering for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're moving towards solid-state battery technology if they can make it happen, and that is a big if. I think that's going to be a revolutionary change in an already revolutionary industry. because they would be running anywhere from 750 to 900 miles of range. If they're running 800 volts, that's less current, which is less heat, which means faster charging times. Plus the fact that solid-state batteries don't tend to have the heat issues that your standard lithium-ion batteries have in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lots of good things that could come from that.
It looks like Ken Pappas is joining us from YouTube. He says, guys, I'm concerned that China will have 95% supply for making batteries. And if the U.S. fully adopts EV, China can choke us.
Ken, I think you have a very good point. And I also think that's why politically the United States put in place the $7,500 EV credit with the restrictions that it has. Because within, I believe it's 3 more years, that EV credit is going to be designed such that between 80 and 100% of your car has to be both sourced and manufactured in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, a battery, not only do you have to manufacture the battery itself in the U.S., but you actually have to source the lithium from U.S. sources in order for it to qualify for that EV credit.
Mm-hmm.
Another good point with that is as we continue to adopt EVs and batteries are recycled, most of the recycling is going to be done here in the United States, right? So once that lithium is out of the ground in the country, it's going to stay here.
Yes.
Good point, Richard. Yes, it's high-grade ore. It'll be recycled.
Yeah.
In fact, it looks like to be announced is answering Ken. He says, no, Ken, Elon is mining here in America and Mexico.
Yeah, and to be announced, you make another good point. With the North American battery standard, it is North America. It's not United States. So something can be manufactured in Canada, in Mexico, or in the U.S. and still be eligible for that U.S. $7,500 tax credit. On TikTok, Brandon asks, what do you think about the X and the S being released in standard range?
Not sure what we mean by that.
I'm not totally sure either.
Later on, we had a TikTok from Bill Wood as well asking about their range. There's a standard range now for Model S and X, and then there's the longer range. They just offer different ranges. So the standard range is like 300, 330, 340, something like that, and then the long range ones are over 400 miles charge.
See.
Okay, so the standard range is simply the smaller battery size. They used to use the nomenclature of the actual battery size, the Model S60 versus the Model S70 versus the versus the 85 or the 90 versus the 100. Now they just use the nomenclature of standard range or extended range. And I know that they have gone to that with their battery technology on the Y and on the 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they used to rate them in kW.
Right.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's 405 on the Model S. The longer range is 405 miles.
Okay.
I think what's happening is that and this is not unique to Tesla. My initial reaction here, they're trying to get a little bit further away from announcing exactly how big their battery is, because they're realizing that bigger battery doesn't always equal better mileage.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a marketing ploy. A long-range F-150 with 320-mile range does not have the same battery size as a long-range Model Y with a single motor and 320 miles of range. That long-range Model Y is sitting there with about an 80-kilowatt battery pack, and the Ford's sitting there with a 225-kilowatt battery pack.
Right. Yeah, substantially larger.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking it's a marketing thing that people don't want to say, well, my Ford should be going twice as far as my Model Y because the battery pack is more than twice the size of the Model Y battery pack.
Gotcha. Okay. You know, we Ray just joined us from YouTube. Welcome. He said, what is your warranty on Model S battery pack repair services? If warranty work is required, who pays for vehicle transport? We do not pay for transport, by the way, because that could, if it's an East Coast customer for us, eat up any margin that we may have had in that battery.
Sure.
It is a problem that needs to be solved, Ray. I don't doubt that for a moment. I think what will happen eventually is that there will be enough independence around the U.S. That this cross-country transport will no longer be an issue. And, competent organizations like us will begin to flourish and grow. And then people will make decisions based on what region that they're in, just like they're currently doing with the service centers that the OEMs have.
Yeah.
They drive to their nearest one. But yeah, that is a problem. And there is no clean, clear-cut solution for that.
Yeah, you really hit on the underlying point there, which is if we do Model S battery pack work, if we do Roadster battery pack work, and that car goes back to its owner, and then something else happens. First, we don't know if it's warranty work up front.
Right.
So we don't know if we should be or should not be attempting to pay for transport. But second, our warranty is on the work that we've done. It's not on how to get the car to us and from us.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very unique problem that's out there because we are one of the only independent repair service centers out there.
Yeah. And, the other thing to factor into that, Ray, is the cost of vehicle transport ever since COVID has tripled from what it used to be. We used to be able to bring in a car from the East Coast for $800 to $1,200. And remember, these are transporters that don't just haul one car. If you think about just the fuel alone, that would $1,200 is probably what it costs them to get it here. But with inflation, rising fuel costs, a lot of transporters took these government handouts during COVID, and many of them did not go back into the business.
Right.
We just we're bringing in a car right now from the East Coast, and it's $2,400. California, we used to be able to get transporters for $300 to $500. Nowadays, it's double, if not triple that. So with transport costs having increased to the extent that they have, that also cuts into the margin that companies like us are able to retain.
By all means. On last Thursday, we talked about the Lucid Sapphire.
Yeah.
I remember my reaction was, my gosh, what an incredible car that is. At the same time, there is video that had been produced talking about is Lucid in its death throes, basically. Is Lucid about to go out of business? Now, we had just seen the video that day, and I had promised a response of what we saw in that video plus our own response.
In fact, let me interject for a moment here. I actually asked our CFO for the Gruber companies to weigh in on the data that was presented. And, in the EV space, you have a lot of influencers that are weighing in on things like, earnings reports, for example, and then drawing conclusions. And there was a video that was posted just recently that really painted a very bleak picture for a major EV manufacturer up and coming, which is Lucid. So I asked Mark, this looks ominous. In fact, you're a shareholder too. It was ominous for you. So I asked our accounting team to weigh in on this. And by the way, we don't just have accounting professionals here in our company. We also outsource a number of accounting type functions, from tax consulting, for example, and reviewing the financials. And anyway, Mark did. We're going to be releasing a video that paints a bit different picture about Lucid within the next few days, so stay tuned. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, Mark was willing to share some of his research that puts this in a different light and adds some perspective to some of this ominous news.
By all means, I'm going to qualify. I'm going to have two qualifications today, not one. The first qualification, like you just said, I have a small number of Lucid shares in my stock portfolio, and so I am considered a Lucid owner. Having said that, I'm going to focus on just the real numbers here. I'm not trying to give you investment advice. I am simply trying to say, here's what's out there, and here's what I see from what's out there. Secondly, I will confess, I had my notes perfectly prepared. And they were wonderful, and they were sitting on our network. And I took, and the very last thing I did before coming to the studio here this morning was to save off my notes and copy them back onto the network, only then to realize that I recopied my notes from last Thursday.
Right.
So I'm going back off of the paper notes here. So it might be a little bit rougher than it would have been otherwise. The Lucid collapse, though, the video that we saw, there were at least three things that I wanted to respond to that were in that video. The first thing was the contention that every car Lucid produced in the second quarter of 2023 cost the company $544,000. That is an important contention in that video. It's used throughout the video to further the idea that Lucid is near collapse. And that number is misleading because $544,000 per car times 1,406 cars delivered roughly equals the total expenses incurred by Lucid in the second quarter, not just the cost of sale expenses. Now, if I were to use that same logic, at the end of 2021, Lucid had roughly $1.5 billion worth of business expenses, and they delivered 125 cars. That means every car cost them $11.2 million. And the 2023 second quarter number is actually 20 times better. And if they continue that route, they're going to be 20 times better again in 2 years. And that $544,000 expense is going to be down around, $25,000 a car. Well, of course, we know it's not reasonable. So that logic itself was faulty in that. That doesn't mean that there's not a higher cost of sales than there is for the car itself, but that means that there is a massive amount of expense that was thrown into what is a cost of sales type number that should not have been. The second thing that I had found that I thought was just not really, really good about the video was the contention that Lucid is a shrinking business. And the idea behind that was that Lucid has had 4,848 cars in inventory since the second quarter of 2022, and their sales is shrinking. Well, that's factually not true. Lucid did not produce car number 4848 until sometime around the end of October or 1st of November of 2022, which is the middle of the fourth quarter, not at the end of the second quarter of 2022. And so I felt that I feel compelled to try to correct that because, again, throughout that video, from the time it's introduced for several minutes through the video, the author goes back to this as a fact, a statement of fact, and builds an argument on something that's just factually not true. Lucid did not reach car number 4848 in inventory until the end of quarter two of 2023. They've been sitting on inventory, but they've only been sitting on that inventory for about 6 weeks. It has been building over time. And actually, it's around 5,000 cars in their annual reports if you count the 2021 cars as well. They said that the video says that if you do the math, it says you have 310 days on hand of vehicles. The idea was if you sold 1,406 cars in a quarter and you have 4,848 cars sitting on the lot, then just do the math, divide it out, and you end up with about 310 or so days worth of cars that you need to sell. The number of days to sell is an accounting function more than it is, and as such, the calculation to make that relies on numbers, not just values. For example, Lucid has some cars that are worth more than other cars because they have different trim levels on their cars. Mm-hmm. Lucid also sells not just cars, but they sell components. Mm-hmm. And the components that they sell, that they're starting to sell and move out, are not counted in that number either. That says I'm going to make every car worth the same value, and I'm going to try to do my calculations based on that. And that's simply not true. The way to figure out the days of inventory that you have on hand is to take a look at your average inventory over a period of time and then divide that average inventory value, and that's a number value, by the cost of sales that was incurred over that same period of time. For Lucid, they had about $933 million of average inventory in the second quarter, and they had about $551 million in their cost of sales. You divide the two numbers out. Daily cost of sales ends up being $6,200 roughly, and you end up with about 150 days worth of inventory, not 310 days. Now, 150 days is still high compared to the industry, not great, but it's not the 310-day apocalyptic bad news type of situation that's out there.
Right.
The final thing that I really wanted to point out in this other video was that the author made the contention that Lucid has missed their sales goal by 90% in 2023, or they're on track to do so. And the evidence that they use is the projections that Lucid had in 2021 about what sales in 2023 would look like. At the beginning of 2021, before Lucid had put a single car off the lot, they said, we think we're going to be able to sell as many as 39,000 cars by 2023 and as many as 90,000 cars by 2024. And our revenue in 2023 is going to be $5.5 billion. In the second quarter, their revenue was way below that at about $150 million. And so looking at the numbers like that, you would say, oh yeah, they're only going to hit about 10% of their goal. The problem is Lucid revised their estimates. They revised their projections in 2021 when they found that there was a supply chain issue that was developing, because that's when supply chain issues developed across industries due to the COVID-19 virus. Companies across industries revised estimates of what they could produce. Lucid is simply another company that did that. They lowered their estimates at the end of 2021, and they lowered them again at the end of the second quarter of 2022. In 2022, at the end of the second quarter, they ended up saying, we're going to try to produce somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 cars. And then in 2023, we're going to try to produce somewhere around 10,000. And that projection, that is what they have held to, what the stock has been priced to, and what everybody agrees is where Lucid needs to try to go. They changed the target that they set. And so to go back to a 3-year-old projection and try to say that you're going to be failing today because you're not meeting projections that you threw out 3 years ago, and these projections are just swags. They're just wild guesses. That's simply not, that shows that the person who was doing this video had what I would call a cognitive bias. They wanted to show evidence that showed that Lucid's about to fail, and they tried to find evidence that would back up the point that they had predetermined.
Right.
What we believe instead is that Lucid is a startup company. They've got some challenges. Their real cost of sales in the first quarter of 2023 was about $376,000 per car that they delivered. And their average revenue on that car was about $107,000. In the second quarter, their cost of sales went up to $396,000 per delivered car, and their revenue of about $107,000 per car stayed static. Near the end of the second quarter, they even announced that they're going to decrease their prices back to the original prices that they had when they first announced the cars. So in the light of increasing costs and decreasing revenue per car, that's one of their biggest threats right now that Lucid has. Some things that Lucid has to offset those threats, though, I think make Lucid a better candidate to be successful than most of the EV startups out there. First, Aston Martin and Lucid have agreed to $450 million worth of sales in electric batteries and powertrain technology. Aston Martin was so impressed after doing a worldwide search of electric vehicle component manufacturers with Lucid that they wanted to get the Lucid motors and battery technology put into their cars as they develop their EV. $450 million is a big deal.
Sandy said that too. He was super blown away by their technology.
Yeah. Sandy did say that. He said the Lucid motor, from an engineering standpoint, It's roughly 1/3 the weight of the Tesla motor and produces the same horsepower. The Saudi Arabian government has a standing order for 50,000 Lucids to be delivered over the next 10 years and an option for another 50,000 cars to be delivered over that same time period. That's an order basically for 100,000 vehicles over 10 years. It's the kind of stabilizer that Rivian has with Amazon, who has an order for 100,000 electric delivery vehicles to be used in Europe and the United States. That kind of thing is going to be a great stabilizing factor for a company like Lucid, because that 50,000 cars is money in the bank, future money in the bank that they have. Probably most importantly for the survival of Lucid is that, like we do, when we have issues that are outside our normal wheelhouse in accounting, we go to outside experts, tax accountants, and CPAs to review our financials, etc. We did the same thing, looking at who are the top 25 owners of Lucid stock right now. In fact, especially who are the top owners of Lucid stock outside of the Saudi Arabian PIF fund, which is their investment fund. And 20 of those 24 other owners are themselves in large investment funds. Most of them are US based, and they're the places like Fidelity and Merrill Lynch and Charles Schwab that have invested in Lucid. When Lucid put out its last stock offering earlier this year to raise capital, 19 of those 20 investment funds actually bought more into Lucid.
Amazing. So they're bullish, basically.
They're all bullish. It's not just the PIF fund that's buying. It's all of the largest owners that are buying into Lucid and into their success, or into their chance for success in the future. That tells me, probably more than any numbers can tell me, that Lucid, at least at this point, they've got issues. They're not really that unique to the issues that virtually all of the startup EV manufacturers have gone through, including Tesla in its early years. But Lucid, other than Rivian, is probably the most well-financed of all of the EV companies that are out there, excepting Tesla, obviously.
Right.
Of those new EV startups. And as such, I think has probably a better chance for success than almost all of them. I haven't even begun to talk about the Gravity SUV. And if that comes out on time and comes out at the price point that they're talking about, and if they're able to make their production goals, the Gravity SUV, I think, is likely to become Lucid's flagship product and will carry that company into the future, much more than a four-door grocery getter sedan that is high-end luxury and is, you know, everybody who sees a high-end luxury four-door sedan is going to be like, yeah, when I wanted that, I got my Tesla.
Mark, excellent presentation. Thank you. I hope we don't move the market today, because we're not giving financial advice here.
Yeah,
yes.
Mark, you want to give your disclosure, and then also a lot of the details of this will be in our video too, so there'll be more coming.
That's right. I'm going to be working with Jesse. We're going to put out a more detailed video about this information. These are my opinions. These are not meant to be advice on whether to buy or sell Lucid. They're simply what I have taken and looked at the numbers and come up with on my own.
Thank you, Mark.
Also,
Yep.
Mark is personally invested in Lucid, so keep that in mind also.
Yes.
Guys, I don't know if you realize this, but I have one Lucid share. And the reason I have one is because when I go to E-Trade my portfolio, I want to see what it's doing every day. And it's kind of exciting to watch it go up and down, 50 cents each time or whatever it is. Looks like we've got a number of questions coming in. And like Jesse says, stay tuned for that in-depth analysis on Lucid, which we're going to be releasing within the next few days. And it will tell a story that you may be interested in. Instagram. Perp Pharaoh says, have you guys heard of the new Koenigsegg 2.0 liter turbo petrol engine that's coupled with 3 electric motors producing 1,700 horsepower?
Wow.
I have not heard of that, no. But, Christian is a Well, he's a tinkerer. He's a car aficionado. He has developed some of the most beautiful cars in the world, and I'm sure that he and his organization are doing the right things. I'm a bit concerned that they're going the hybrid route at this point because that's just something I can't get my head around. But with 1,700 horsepower, there may be a good reason for that. And if you can afford a car like his, then the expense to service it probably won't be that much of a concern.
You know, my initial thought would be probably that you're generating 500 horsepower per electric motor or thereabouts. And with that 2.0 liter turbo diesel, all you're doing is producing another 200 horsepower at most.
Yeah.
Well, and just 200 is kind of a misnomer. That's still a lot of ponies.
Yeah. TikTok Bill Wood says, "What is the longest range in a Tesla now?" It's probably under 600 because that's what Lucid has been touting, and and they've been winning a lot of recognition for that. So it must be just under 600 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess it's gonna be either the long range Model Y or the long range Model 3, and probably the Model 3 because it's a somewhat lighter car. I'm not sure for that though, Ken.
YouTube, Stephen Rose. Welcome back, Stephen. He says, "I converted a 986 Porsche to all electric, and your videos encouraged me to a higher standard of build." Well, thank you and for that compliment. You know, these are fun projects. I envy you. If I had the bandwidth and time, I'd love to engage in this kind of tinkering, but these days I just can't find that much time.
You know, if you could send us a picture or some pictures or even some videos of that Porsche, that would be pretty incredible to see.
It would be.
On YouTube, to be announced, says, "This is part of my question. The 2022 Model S long range 100 kilowatt battery versus the 2019 to 2020 Raven Model S, the 2-engine Model S." I think he's talking about the acceleration in this case and, you know, the newer versus older Model S's.
So,
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead, Jesse.
real quick, we might have to ask some of the guys over there that do some of the test driving. I don't know if we've seen any of those newer ones because we deal with a lot of out of warranty stuff, but we can ask them about that acceleration. I don't know of anything firmware wise or anything that's changed that would change the acceleration though.
Right.
Well, and that's a good point, Jesse, that you know, for to be announced to remember is that we're working on the stuff that's older. We're working on the stuff that's out of warranty. We're just really getting into working on the Model S's on a consistent basis, largely because if you go back 8 years, that goes all the way back to, let's see now, 2015. And so our universe of Model S's is about 25,000 cars, even though there are somewhere around 150 to 200,000 Model S's that are out there. And our universe of what we typically look at and repair doesn't even include the Model 3 and the Model Y yet. So we're kind of learning along with the crowd on some of this stuff.
So I've got an article here from a Fisker-Magna partnership and about leveraging manufacturing expertise. And I thought I would weigh in on this. It is I think it's a sound policy. Henry Fisker has been in business before and filed for Chapter 11 and eventually went away. And with this current reemergence of Fisker product, one distinguishing characteristic is that he is now in a strategic alliance with Magna International, who is an automotive supplier and contract manufacturer. It caught my interest because so many of these new EV manufacturers are attempting to do it all. They have to develop the engineering expertise. They have to build their batteries. They then have to do the auto design. And then they have to build infrastructure, a service delivery system. And, you know, you can do so many things well, but to do them all at once is daunting. It's not impossible. Other companies have done it. A time-tested, proven method of becoming successful in a particular market is to rely and subcontract certain portions, so to rely on subcontract manufacturing. And according to this article, they say that Magna has a long history of building cars for well-known manufacturers. The clients include Toyota, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, including the classic G-Wagon, and the company knowledge and resources and established supply chain are huge advantages to any emerging EV manufacturer. Now remember, established supply chain is very important. That's something else that you have to develop. You have to find your vendors. First, you have to find people that can procure, that can source. Then you have to combine that with some engineering talent to find the right product. And then you have to attract vendors. And typically, like Tesla ran into with the Roadster, you're not going to attract the highest quality vendors when you're only ordering 2,400 of something, which is what the Roadster was. 2,412 was the original production run. So you end up with a whole host of challenges that you have to solve. By going to contract manufacturing that have a proven track record with some of these major auto brands, you have an existing established supply chain with vendors that are familiar with the company and have been tested and proven to be reliable because they, when you do incoming inspection, you weed out your poor performing vendors fairly quickly. So anyway, my hat's off to Henry Fisker for the second go around. Of course, they're working on the Fisker Ocean SUV currently, and it looks like they have a much better chance at success with this product. Social media is pointing us at the screen. We've got a lot of questions that we need to entertain. And Ray Johnson, welcome Ray from YouTube. He says the Model S/X standard range was announced yesterday. Current thought is batteries are same sized, just corked to reduce range.
That might be a possibility. Also might be a possibility that the battery structure itself will be the same, but they'll simply be one module or two modules fewer, just like we had in the older Model S's. You always had space for 16 modules, but only the largest and longest range batteries actually had all 16 modules in them.
Right, and there was a cost savings, of course, by not populating it fully. And it seems to be a bit more fair than what had been going on in the critical power world, where a UPS manufacturer would sell you a 500 kVA UPS and then give you only 150 kVA usable, capacity. But all of the hardware was there, and then they would come out with a laptop, and $14,000 later, they would uncork your UPS for more kVA or more, energy. 250 and eventually 500 kVA. And of course, the argument by the owners was, well, wait a minute, I paid for the whole thing up front. Why is it that, you're not giving it to me immediately at the time of purchase? And it was because there was a lot of revenue to be generated by uncorking these units.
Well, and I think the only reason that the UPS manufacturers in this case didn't simply remote into the UPS to uncork it is because they knew already that the customer was going to be upset. And they're completely capable of uncorking it remotely. But if they don't at least bring a person out there, then all sense of
fairness,
propriety and fairness gets lost. Not that it's not already.
Yeah, good point. YouTube, Juan Carlos Morataya Ramos from Guatemala says, nice to see you guys. Likewise, thank you for joining us this morning.
Good to see you again. And Van Goatwagon is back on TikTok. He says, I drove from Charlotte to Nashville and back. I saw one Lucid and one Rivian on the interstates. Mark needs an assistant.
Okay. Instagram, Himanshu Shriva, love from India. Thank you for joining us.
TikTok, False Hopes says, I've been seeing more Rivians on the road myself and not as many Lucids. Here in Arizona, we happen to see a lot of both. There's a Rivian repair center about a mile away from the shop here. So we see a lot of Rivians around. And of course, with Lucid having their headquarters down about 100 miles south of us in Casa Grande, that means we end up seeing a lot of Lucids around as well.
YouTube, to be announced, is saying, I can send you data from testing that we have done, just picking your brains. What email are you guys using? It's ev@gruber.com, ev@gruber.com. And he says, obviously, the next podcast, we can see if you choose to get into this. All right. Yeah, fair enough. Send us that email and we'll put it on the agenda.
By all means. And he continues and says, Lucid is struggling, in my opinion. Very low sales, and they haven't adopted the Tesla plug yet.
Yeah, there we go.
You know, my opinion on the whole plug thing is that Lucid is flexing their ego. Once they talk, now there's a significant advantage to 800 volt charging, which is what Lucids do. And there is still some question about whether the Gen 4 Tesla superchargers are going to do 800 volts or not. The consensus seems to be that it probably will, but we're not totally sure yet.
TikTok, Bill Wood is asking, I don't drive my Model X a lot. Should I leave it plugged in while I'm not driving it? You know, it doesn't hurt. It keeps it top charged, and the aging batteries in the Tesla Roadster definitely like to stay top charged. We think that will extend the life, which, by the way, now for legacy Roadsters is 15 years. It's pretty remarkable that they're lasting this long.
You know, on the Model S, the Model Y, the X, and the 3, the battery technology was set up such that the connector, and you have the term for it, that's manual. We have a service plug on a Roadster, and there's a contact connector on those other models that automatically disengages when the car is powered down, and that effectively saves the battery for a number of years from the type of vampire drain that was so persistent in the Roadsters. That doesn't mean, however, that you don't want to have it charged up. My personal opinion, based on what I've seen from IEEE publications, things like that, yeah, if you can keep that battery charged up around that 80% area, that's probably the best place for it to live.
Good point. YouTube, Nolver53 says, I may have asked this before, but when solid-state batteries come out, will it be as simple as someone swapping out a lithium-ion battery pack for a solid-state battery pack? Is it that simple? Well, not really. The firmware in the EVs carefully monitor a number of parameters within the high-voltage battery pack, including charge cycles and charge levels. And it's very difficult to replicate precisely a chemistry and a charging curve with a different type of battery. So my take on this would be that there would have to be some firmware changes. Now, again, going into the aftermarket space, as the battery technology continues to evolve and improve, there will be companies that will make aftermarket replacement battery packs, and it'll be their job to develop the emulation packages and the translation software in order to accommodate different types of firmware and different EV vehicle charging methods.
I think the charging profile on a lot of these solid-state batteries is going to be different than what we have on lithium-ion batteries right now, and that may be a real challenge. Lithium-ion batteries, like on a Tesla Model S, for example, even the Gen 3 chargers, which will go up to 250 kilowatts, they're typically pumping higher amperage and about 400 volts into that battery. The solid-state batteries, I think part of the charging profile or part of their advantage is that they're going to be able to take higher voltage, 800 or eventually even 1,000 or more volts. And when you have a higher voltage, it's the amperage that causes the heat, not the voltage. And that's what's going to cause the batteries to be able to charge faster. Are people going to dial back the voltage on a solid-state battery in order to make sure that it can charge appropriately in an older car? Sure. I don't know. That's going to be a challenge.
And, you know, so much of battery management is in the realm of safety. You know, we all know what the volatile consequences of an overcharged lithium-ion battery is. And so, yeah, there will be changes, and it won't be as simple as just simply swapping it out. And again, there will be manufacturers, aftermarket people that will develop these kinds of emulation hardware and software packages.
Yeah, most definitely. Nulver53 continues and says, I'm liking the Fisker Alaska. In a world saturated with oversized trucks being driven, the Alaska is a breath of fresh air.
We'll have to bring a picture of that to the next show to see what that Alaska Fisker looks like.
It is. I've seen one picture of it. It's a fairly small vehicle. Looks like it's even going to be smaller than the Cybertruck by a fair amount.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like the old style Datsun or the old style Toyota as compared to the newer style Nissan Frontier or the Toyota Tacoma.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a smaller and more compact pickup truck.
We've got Highlander Apparel on YouTube chiming in. Hi, guys. Welcome. YouTube. We just
Lightning Rod is saying hi from Thunder Bay.
Oh, from Thunder Bay. Okay. There we go. Van Goatwagon, he says, Lucid makes a beautiful product. I'm in. Yeah, that is an understatement. It is a beautiful, gorgeous car inside and out.
Yes, Highlander Apparel on YouTube says, Lucid won't go under. Even though I'm a Roman Catholic, I have a lot of Muslim friends, and that's all I can say. P.S. Kindness is still free.
Well, thank you for joining us. Yeah.
To be announced on YouTube says the long range S is 405 long range S. I think he's meaning that that's the range for the long range Model S.
Mm-hmm. And YouTube to be announced says, I totally understand. I have data I will send you guys. Are the engines the same? Well, send that to ev@gruber.com and yeah, we'll take a look at it.
By all means. Sean the Airman on TikTok has a good question for us. Good morning, Sean. He says, so why doesn't Tesla allow reverse flow car to home during an outage?
No, we don't know. The test mule that Tesla was based on was an AC propulsion T0. It was an electric sports car that inspired Martin Eberhard initially and Mark Tarpenning, and then later on Elon Musk to continue creating a Tesla Roadster EV sports car. And the T0 actually did have V2G, vehicle to grid. It was way ahead of its time in a number of categories. Why Tesla did not continue with vehicle to grid is still a mystery. And it'll be solved at some point in time, but there are many other manufacturers now that are taking that seriously. Your Ford F-150 Lightning, for example, has vehicle to house, I think they call it, which allows, there's an inverter built into it, basically, that will allow you to run 120 volts AC from your truck, which, of course, for a work truck is important, you know?
Oh, by all means. And Ford's not the only one. Most of the legacy truck manufacturers, Stellantis for their Dodge Ram Revolution, Chevrolet has announced with the Silverado, and of course Ford with the Lightning, that they all will have configurations that allow you to power your house if the power goes out. So effectively vehicle to home.
Hey guys, isn't the I thought I read something where the new Powerwall that's coming out will allow the Tesla to hook into your home and power your home. And I thought that was going to be one of the major features of the Cybertruck, that you'll be able to do that. Have we confirmed that with the new Powerwall that's coming out?
I did not.
I have not confirmed that as of yet, Aaron. I have heard about that as a possibility.
You know, we actually had a segment here on the fact that Tesla is not just a EV car company. The Powerwall is rapidly gaining ground within Tesla as a revenue generator.
Mm-hmm.
And the projections are that that is a huge, rapidly expanding market.
You know, I think Tesla is going to end up with almost as much revenue between their charging infrastructure and their stationary power infrastructure as what they have in their cars.
That would be amazing.
With the way that the way that those two pieces of the business are growing.
How they're positioned.
Yeah, and how they're positioned. It's absolutely amazing to see that Tesla might end up with more in profits from its non-auto sales than it does from its auto sale than many other auto manufacturers will have from their auto sales.
You know, we knew there was a strategy early on when Tesla first began releasing the Model S, and they began developing a charging system across the United States. And they gave you free charging.
Mm-hmm.
And we all asked, you know, Do any of the ICE incumbents give you free gasoline for the life of your car? It's unheard of, right?
Mhm.
How can Tesla sustain this? Well, two things that we suspected. One is they wouldn't sustain it forever, and they didn't. They cut that
Correct.
off, I think, in 2016 or so, 2017.
2016, I think. I
Yeah.
think 2015 is the last of the free supercharger cars.
And of course, they needed to do that in order to make sure that there was sufficient EV adoption. If people can't get fuel while they're on the road, then what good is an electric vehicle? It
Right.
makes sense.
Right.
It's not just an about town commute car. The second phase of that was we all suspected here they have this infrastructure that's rapidly evolving, charging infrastructure. And it can charge other EVs. Whether there's a connector issue, that can easily be solved. And now, of course, with the NACS, with the adoption, that's been solved. But we all saw that there was going to be a huge revenue-generating opportunity by the first company to really build a global charging infrastructure. And there's Tesla now, taking full advantage of that.
They're taking their experience from 15 years, and nobody else has experience that's more than 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Nissan, I don't kind of don't count Nissan because they had the Leaf for a long time, and then they just kind of discontinued it, and only recently came out with their second EV model.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful car, but why did they take so long, and why did they discontinue the Leaf as soon as the second model came out? I don't know.
Yeah. Instagram, Soul to Stone says, to me, he says, Lucid is like Jaguar, but Tesla is comparable to Audi. He says, Lucid is a beautiful car, but their network repair centers will have a long road. I don't know one shop that would no way body or do any body work. See, guys, I read whatever you type. Just remember that. Now, don't get cute with that. The service delivery, and we've talked about that before. Tesla had to do it. There was nothing out there. These other incumbents or these new EV manufacturers do not have the same problem because once the independent service capability begins to grow and expand globally, they're going to be able to outsource to shops like us. With a little bit of training and documentation, we can easily pivot into other brands. So it'll be easier for the next generation EV manufacturers, including Lucid.
By all means, it will. On Instagram, Wade says, I want to set up an EV shop in my country. Do you guys consult?
We get asked that question at least once a week these days, and just don't have the bandwidth to be able to scale, train, do formal training in-house or on-site, unfortunately. Again, OJT, or if you can hire people from the existing EV manufacturers, they will bring skills with them. That's one other way that you could grow your service delivery capability in your area.
Going through and watching the videos that we've done over the years will help give you an idea of some of the things that you're going to need to learn. And that, honestly, is about as good of an education area as any that I could think of anymore.
Yeah, our videos are almost like a diary in many ways. An accounting of the challenges and tribulations that we faced as we grew.
That's right. YouTube, Crunch to Grace Hopper, like number 6, he says, catching up from way back, 25 minutes. It's never too late to replay, but still time to smash that thumb, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
At Stephen Rose, he says, how to find out about your electrified Porsche? I plan to do the same for my Mazda RX-8. So it sounds like we need to have the two of them chat with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Highlander Apparel, again on YouTube, says, I know Magna very well. I was a contractor for them. The daughter was a Canadian VM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to get more information about Magna and present that on the podcast.
Yeah, we definitely will. On Instagram, Sai the Curious says, again, love from Pune, India. This is Sai from Pune. Thank you for sharing the knowledge to us. Well, thank you. I'm so glad you were able to join us. For India, this is late night, about 11 o'clock in the evening. So we really, really appreciate you joining us.
Highlander Apparel says from from YouTube. Best podcast ever. Very interactive. Yeah, we're getting a lot of discussion on our audience stream today. Oh my God, they're still coming in.
Oh,
All right,
we love it.
Let's
We gotta
try to
smash
get
through
them.
these. We're almost out of time here.
All right. YouTube, Ryan Flint says, I think it would be amazing to see an LFP battery compatible with a Tesla Model S. That's true.
Oh, I think so too. Ryan Flint says, I like the Fisker Alaska too.
Mm-hmm.
And to be announced says Highlander. I agree.
And then Switzerland, YouTube, Martin Fisher says, hello from Davos, Switzerland. Thank you for joining us.
To be announced continues and says, vehicle to house. I think it would be a great addition to a Tesla to eventually adopt, specifically since I have 2 Teslas sitting in my garage.
Right.
Yes. Ryan Flint, I think, has given a clarification a little bit, Aaron, for us. He says, Powerwall is compatible with the new Tesla software to enable solar charging. I definitely know about that one.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Trucker Alistair, he's back. He says, hi, love to see you guys again. After 3 weeks, I was in Europe in a family vacation. But what's up with the MBQE EV? Seeing they got a lot of fires. Also, the car vessel on fire in Holland. Do you know anything about that?
Assuming Mercedes-Benz, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. He says he has a lot of catching up to do and to see our videos. Yeah, they're out there. They're posted under the live section of our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I do remember from a few weeks ago that there was a ship that had caught fire. It had about 500 electric vehicles and close to 3,000 ICE vehicles on it. And I don't remember what exactly happened with that particular ship. We did not cover that very much in our podcast.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Highlander Apparel says Sandy Munro. By the way, he was, I did a podcast with him yesterday, live. No, live, they're going to edit.
Not
Yeah,
live.
it will be on their Munro Live channel, which is smaller than the big one. So look for that. It should be out within the next week or so. But he says, Sandy Munro was mistaken about the 48-volt transition. Forklift trucks are 48 volt. Trust me. I hope to see a fully charged, to see you guys at fully charged in Vancouver. I'll be the guy in the kilt if I can. Yeah, that would be interesting. Thank you for joining us.
That would be cool. We'll have to look up what when fully charged is going on in Vancouver. And then George is with us from the Watch Rich Rebuilds channel. George, a message for you before I read your question. At some point, are you going to say the Watch Gruber Morning Show channel? Or even just the Watch Gruber channel?
You know, you could get 2 identities on YouTube and then just simply toggle between them. That way you're not leaving Rich high and dry when he's doing something that you're participating in.
Well, my hope is, of course, George, when you go on to Rich's channel, you would be on the Watch Gruber channel.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, just alternate them then.
Good to have you on today. He says, hey, guys, sorry I'm late.
And it looks like we've got...
And that looks
that's
like
it.
we're it with
we're done with the
questions.
questions. See, I'll read it.
Yeah, but we are also at time.
We are.
We're going to be back again tomorrow at 10 o'clock for the Roadster Roundtable podcast and have the more general EV podcast again on Thursday. Looks like we've got a couple of things to research, huh, Pete?
We've got some things to research, and we have leftover talking points from today, so we won't have to do as much work preparing for Thursday.
Look forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. The interaction is really what makes the time fly for us, and I know that's what makes things work well and so good for you too. So thank you for your participation.
We'll see you tomorrow or Thursday then. Thank you.